So, the second arc of the My Little Pony comics deals with the rise of Nightmare Rarity. Oh god, here we go. Now, for those of you who are uninitiated with these comics and the critical response therein, the Nightmare Rarity arc is probably the most divisive among the fandom. Some people love it, some people hate it, and a good solid portion of the comments in my last MLP comic review were, "You're gonna talk about Nightmare Rarity next, right? I love or hate that one." Clearly we need to sit down and chat this one over a bit. I'm not really sure why I was so surprised when I heard that this arc had a really divisive storyline. After all, this fandom has proved time and time again that, if nothing else, it is a master of creating drama out of nearly anything. And while the comics don't create nearly as much as a kerfluffle as something that would happen in the show, people either love or hate this arc. And that means no matter where I stand on the issue, I get the unfortunate privilege of pissing off a whole bunch of people regardless. And from the comments I've seen about the Reflections arc, I'm set to do this all over again in a month or two. Yay me. Now, I'm pretty sure the big point of contention with this arc comes from Nightmare Rarity and her implications with Princess Luna, and it seems like the people who sing this arc's praises tend to ignore the negative repercussions the story has on the overarching lore of the series in general, and those that focus on such things tend to ignore the characterization and emotional moments going on that the proponents tend to laud. At least, I think that's where they come from. I don't know exactly what people are saying specifically other than the aforementioned comments, which rarely go into much detail, and I haven't really felt the need to look any further into it than that. I don't have the time to look at the entire community spectrum of opinions in depth. I have a lot more important things to do, like writing fanfiction? Okay, so I don't have anything else really going on. I guess I just don't fucking care. So here's my breakdown of this particular tale of ponydom. It's not that good. Oh god! Oh god, please! Don't crucify me! I beg you! I'm gonna be fair! I'm gonna be fair! I promise! Just hear me out here! I have good things to say too! Just let the defendant make his case, okay? It's funny, actually. I had to go back and edit this paragraph a fair bit, since I started writing this intro before sitting down and reading this arc a second time. On my first go-through when the books were first released, I was generally happy with what I'd been presented. Sure, it wasn't perfect, it had screwed the plot hole quite a bit here and there, but I thought it did a lot of things right too. I figured that the majority of this video was going to be me going back and forth about the implications this book has with Nightmare Moon and Luna as a character, as that seems to be what everyone is in a tizzy about. And while I'm certainly going to be mentioning that, I was surprised at the tail end of my second read of just how much of the fundamentals were off in these comics, so much so that it overshadowed even Luna. So, my last video on Queen Chrysalis was pretty much spoiler-free, because that story is largely considered good, and I could sing its praises while leaving the major narrative aspects vague, since there wasn't much specific I needed to cite. Not so here. In order to cut to the heart of this debate surrounding these books and clarify what I feel is working and what's not, I'm gonna have to break some stuff down a bit more specifically, so if you haven't read this story yet, you should probably go do that now. Don't worry, I'll wait. Ready? Okay. Let's dig into this. So the general plot of this arc is that the main six have been experiencing nightmares for the last week and change, and are all exhausted because of that. Pinky, being Pinky, feels all they need is a good old-fashioned slumber party to tire themselves out and get in a relaxed mood, so they can all enjoy a disturbance-free night of catching some Z's. Unfortunately, their nightmares turn out to be a remnant of the power of Nightmare Moon, and those powers kidnap Rarity right out of Twilight's library, corrupt her, and make her the new Nightmare Moon, and then wage a war on all of ponykind. It's up to the remaining five and Spike to take a stand against the forces controlling their friend and rescue her, but as noble as their intentions are, the true source of salvation may lie in a certain Princess of the Night's ability to let go of her lingering guilt about her past and realize her own potential. It's an interesting plot to be sure, though if the last arc of the comics taught us anything, it's that the duo of Katie Cook and Andy Price have a deep love and understanding of these characters, and have a fantastic track record of handling this world and its inhabitants coming off of the return of Queen Chrysalis. So, how does the pair make out in their second outing? Well, they don't, because they aren't here. A quick perusal of the cover and or opening credits will reveal that replacing the duo this round are writers Heather Newfer and artist Amy Meberson. And unfortunately, the shuffling of talent is indeed noticeable. From a visual aspect, the ponies, while for the most part are pretty par for the course, lack a fair bit of the emotion and energy that Price brought to the table at best, with the characters becoming downright wonky and distorted at times at worst, even during simple profile shots. The even bigger casualty here, though, is the writing. Writing is the cornerstone of any piece of media. And if you watch my video on the last arc, click here if you haven't, you'll notice that I lauded Cook's almost indescribable wit, and how it went a long way towards selling me on the first 4 books. And while Newfer's words are serviceable, they're nowhere near what Cook was pulling off. Subsequently, characterization takes a bit of a hit here as well. The entire cast feels a bit stilted compared to Cook's portrayal, but some characters are worse than others. Why is Rainbow suddenly becoming Pinkie Pie Light, constantly making bizarre gags? Why is AJ so forcibly using southern slang that she's never used in the show proper? It just doesn't flow all that well. The writing of this arc in general is just not nearly as tight as the previous, and characterization comes off a lot flatter. The biggest sin in my book, though, are the constant use of forced bits of dialogue to try and smooth out scene transitions and introduce new plot points. They can be pretty cringe-inducing at times, with characters all of a sudden spouting out random, disconnected prose in the middle of conversations that comes out of nowhere, the only reason they're uttered to set up the next part of the story. It's difficult to sidestep things like these when crafting a narrative, I know that firsthand, but nothing shatters my sense of immersion more than the act of merely finishing a script, superseding natural character interaction and conversation. If you read this book and didn't notice it before, going back and reading it now that I've mentioned it, I guarantee you'll spot it. Funnily enough, the best written character in this book is probably Spike. Throughout the arc, his actions are those of a child through and through, but never insultingly so, with optimism still tempered with a believable amount of fear and self-doubt that speaks to his best portrayals in the series. His motivations stay true to his affection towards Rarity by never flinching in his desire to rescue her. He even sings his own theme music as he marches towards the castle. He was an enjoyable character to be around in the book, and his struggle to save the one he loves was endearing and natural, getting a few lines of legitimately emotional dialogue that speak to his crush he has on Rarity, which, at the time of this book's release, had been all but ignored by the series proper. And tying it all together with the fire ruby from Secret of My Excess was another nice, subtle callback to the show itself. Though there was this weird, out-of-place bit with him stumbling on and befriending these weird chameleon slugs that help him infiltrate the villain's lair, but it was a relatively minor scene, and not enough to ruin the good he brought to the story. One of the things I did enjoy in this arc on my first go-around was the angle they play with Rarity, and why she was chosen to become the villain. We get a peek at all the characters' dreams during the sleepover, and Rarity's dream is great. It shows her fears of being replaced in the minds of her friends, mostly because she feels they no longer appreciate the work she does for them. I dig this for 2 reasons. 1, because it speaks to the fear all artists have about their creativity being rejected, and 2, that as logical a characterization this trait is for someone like Rarity, it also calls back to her insecurities as glimpsed in Sweet and Elite, where she felt her work, and by extension herself, wasn't worthy of being in Canterlot. The fact that in her dream she's replaced by a bona fide version of Mabel from Gravity Falls, no, I'm not kidding, is just icing on the cake. Something else I found pretty cool was how the book attempts to explain why Luna's mane changed during the hiatus from Season 1 to Season 2, which I suppose would place the story itself in between those seasons as well. A big part of the book's overall story is about Princess Luna's fallout after being reverted back from Nightmare Moon, and how she still harbors guilt over her tenure as an evil Mayor of Darkness. The book decides to use her ethereal mane as a symbol, a representation for finally realizing her full potential when she at last lets go of all of that guilt and is able to see herself as an equal with not only her sister, but among all the residents of Equestria. It's a really creative solution to what was almost assuredly a simple aesthetic change on the part of the DHX staff, and puts a band-aid on the inconsistency quite competently. Alright, so far, okay, the book has dropped the ball a few times, but hey, what comic hasn't, right? There's still some cool stuff going on. The book has gotta be at least decent, right? Things start to get weird from a single line of dialogue. It's quick, it's subtle, but it has massive ramifications. Luna exposits to the main 6 at the beginning of the arc that she was trapped as Nightmare Moon. Trapped, huh? What was that supposed to mean? It seemed pretty clear from the initial exposition given in the show that Batty Moonbutt was a conscious decision on the part of Luna. The form was an embodiment of her jealousy and her own lack of self-worth compared to her sister. The surrounding legend that Luna speaks of concerning the Nightmare Forces, their origin, and their return also seems a bit questionable if no one but Luna knew about the forces anyway. Though this property has a history with legends that no one knows about, so how much bull can I really call here? I will admit that in isolation, the concept of the Nightmare Forces is an interesting one, like a bona fide version of the symbiote costume from Spider-Man, bonding with the host and subtly influencing their decisions for its own benefit. But when applied to Princess Luna, not only does it contradict what we've been shown in the show, but it seriously hampers her as a character, taking a strong emotional conflict focused on a very real sensation and deflating it to simple mind control. And this brings me to my next point. If there are these nightmare forces that took over Luna, and Celestia fought them, and the legend mentions their return, And Luna makes it clear that she knew that the Nightmare Forces enslaved the residents of the moon. Yeah, I know, just roll with it. Doesn't that mean that the Nightmare Forces have been on the moon this whole time? Why didn't we ever think of taking care of them before now? Did leaving a bunch of evil creatures that corrupted your sister to their own devices in a secluded location really seem like a good idea? Okay, whatever. I mean, there are evil creatures on the moon that we've allowed to run rampant for who knows how long. As dumb as that is, I guess I can't get too mad. I mean, they're on the friggin' moon. It's not like Celestia and Luna could just, I don't know, go there whenever they felt like it. Oh, come off it! I mean, yes, this is clearly a geocentric universe, so the sun and the moon operate in a different fashion than the real deal, so I can obviously excuse the science behind it, but come on! This makes Nightmare Moon's banishment to the moon 1,000 years ago a bit difficult to stomach now, don't you think? Like, it seemed as if it took all the powers of the elements of harmony to get Luna to the moon, but now you're telling me all you need is an abnormally long rope and some elbow grease? Kinda knocks this whole scene down a few pegs, don't you think? Even ignoring that, though, and accepting that taking a lunch break on the moon is a thing we can do, it still doesn't make the method of transportation they decide on any less insane. Why are we lassoing the moon and dragging it closer to Earth, and then expecting our heroes to tightrope their way from one planetary body to another? Hell, even Celestia mentioned that this isn't friggin' safe for the wingless members of the cast. Again, this is clearly a different kind of world that operates with different rules, so I won't hear and bitch about fucking with the tides or shit like that. But why such an asinine mode of transit? Teleportation already exists in this reality. Why not just poof there and back? Luna even ends up using her magic to get them the rest of the way regardless, so why even bother with this setup? Both Luna and the main six end up returning to Earth without the need for the lasso in the following books, so again, why even bother? And before you decide to say this in the comments, yes, it's magical talking horses, so what can I really say? But still, this just seems like a bizarre stretch, even for this world. The final eyebrow raise comes from Pinkie Pie, and essentially the Nightmare Forces as well. The problem really stems from the two henchmen featured prominently in these books. They come off as goofy and lighthearted even though they're supposed to be part of a real threat. It undermines the tone the book is trying to portray the Nightmare Forces as, merely for the sake of pointless comedic relief, as Pinkie and, for some reason, Rainbow Dash are already filling this role in the story. They go even further with this though, and their stupidity is used as an excuse for lazy writing on top of everything else. Without a competent way to get the main six out of the dungeon they're all trapped in during issue 3, they have these two lackey creatures lose the key to the cell the ponies are all trapped in. And then Pinkie just happens to mention at the most convenient moment for the script that the key was in her mane the whole time. It's not even like she finds it by accident either. She knew it was there the entire time they were imprisoned. They could have escaped immediately, but the script said they had to meet back up with Spike first, so she sits on this info until he shows up. They even have the gall to have this panel immediately after of Pinkie winking at the audience, as if she's goading you on, like, yeah, we just completely pulled that out of our ass without any semblance of logic or respect for your intelligence. Fun, huh? The drawing might be of Pinkie Pie, but all I can see is this. Bullshit. Oh hey, look, it's Trixie. Well, not really gonna go anywhere with that. It's just Trixie. That's cool. And for a bonus eyebrow raiser, what's up with the Remain 5 shooting friendship beams at Nightmare Rarity? This whole new made-up power starts when they're in the dungeon. Apparently Twilight thinks about her friendships, again ham-fistedly introduced with a forced bit of dialogue, and she suddenly starts glowing, and the others then do the same. A weird point in and of itself, but I'm willing to let that go. But then this manifests again as some sort of power that seemingly stands in for the elements of harmony, even though the entire point of Nightmare Rarity was that capturing her left the Remain 5 defenseless. But then they introduce this new MacGuffin almost immediately afterwards. Though they eventually revert Nightmare Rarity with their feelings of friendship toward her, reminding the fashionista of all the good times they've had together, ignoring this tangible power only a few pages after it's established, which makes me wonder why they even bothered in the first place. But then we introduce more problems, because if all it takes to break the control of the Nightmare Forces is remembering the good times you had together, one has to ask why Celestia had to resort to banishing her own sister for 1,000 years. Are we to believe that poor Sunbutt never once reflected on the fond memory she shared with her sister when they were locked in mortal combat? With their presumably multi-millennial lifespans the pair has shared, I'm rather confident that Celestia would have more good memories with her sister than the entirety of the main six had with Rarity combined, especially considering this takes place after season 1. If context clues are to be believed. Did Celestia just not wish hard enough? But whatever, the fond memories win the day and evil is vanquished, and Luna whisks away with the recovered citizens of the moon over some Saturday morning-styled moral narration, and the book promptly ends with not so much as a hint of an epilogue. Overall, this is not a very good follow-up to the first 4 issues. I remember being a lot more hype about it when it was first released, but rereading it now, this is kind of what I was afraid the comics would be when I first heard IDW was going to make MLP books in the first place. The characterization is questionable, the plot is riddled with holes and contrivances, and things just downright don't make sense from time to time. While there are some interesting ideas at play here, and Rarity and Spike both get some nice moments, and even Luna with her vanquishing of her self-doubt, none of these moments or concepts are enough to salvage the overall story for me. It just doesn't live up to the quality of the previous arc, or the show that spawned it. Nightmare Rarity ended up being a disappointment. Not even my Rarity bias is enough to save these books for me. It just feels very clumsily executed. The lifeblood of the first arc of My Little Pony seemed to be the passion and skill that Katie Cook and Andy Bryce brought to the table, and this second arc, in my mind, proves it.